The bullet shattered the window above Malik's head. Nayara didn't scream. She dropped, body over her son, arms locked around him, pulling him beneath the kitchen table in one fluid motion born from every nightmare she'd never let herself have. Glass rained down on her back. She pressed her lips to Malik's hair and breathed. Once, twice. He was trembling. Or maybe that was her. Baby. Her voice came out steady. She'd learned that trick in the ICU. Keep your voice level even when everything inside you is breaking. Don't move. Stay right here. Mama, I got you. The apartment went deathly quiet. Then, from the hallway, 3 sharp knocks. A code she didn't know she'd memorized until that moment. The door opened without her unlocking it. Jaewon moved through the apartment like a shadow given weight. White shirt, collar open, the dragon tattoo on his neck dark against his skin. In his right hand, a phone. His eyes swept every corner before they landed on her, crouched on the floor, shielding her child, meeting his gaze with a fury that had nowhere left to go. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "Right now." She'd spent 12 days telling herself she didn't trust this man. She grabbed Malik and followed him without hesitation. Let's go back to where it all started, 12 days earlier, on the coldest night Chicago had seen in a decade. 12 days earlier. The wind off Lake Michigan had a personal grudge against the South Side that February. Nayara Bennett knew better than to linger outside after a 12-hour night shift at Cook County Hospital. She knew better than most things. That was the problem. She was so busy knowing better that she almost stepped over the man without stopping. Almost. He was folded against the wall beneath a marquise on South Michigan Avenue, the kind of crouch that wasn't sleeping. It was controlled, deliberate, like someone who had learned how to take up as little space as possible and had been doing it long enough to look like furniture. His clothes were wrong for the cold, a dark jacket that had once been expensive, now torn at the shoulder, dark slacks soaked through at the knees. No gloves, no hat. A security guard from the pharmacy next door was already moving toward him, gesturing. Nayara stopped. She told herself it was the nurse in her, the part that catalogued a man's pallor before she'd even decided to look. Grey-tinged, shallow breath, left arm pressed tight to his ribs, the protective stance of someone guarding an injury, not resting. "Hey." She kept her voice even. 2 meters between them, her hand loose around her pepper spray inside her coat pocket. "You okay?" The man raised his eyes, dark, clear, terrifyingly alert for someone sitting in 7-degree weather with what she was increasingly certain was a cracked rib. "I'm fine," he said, low voice, measured, English clean and careful, like someone who had learned the language with attention. "You're not." She nodded at the arm he was still guarding. "That's a pressure hold. That's pain management." He studied her for a moment, not the way men usually studied her at 2 a.m. on a Chicago street, more like an equation he was working through. "Go home," he said. "It's cold." "I'm a nurse. I can see you from here." She took 1 step closer. He didn't move. "What's your name?" A pause, then, "Jaewon." "Jaewon." She said it back, let her tongue find the shape of it. "I'm Nayara. How long have you been outside? It doesn't matter. It matters to your core temperature." She watched his jaw tighten. "I'm not calling anyone. I don't have anywhere to be except home, which is 4 blocks from here. My son is at my neighbor's, and he sleeps until 7. She paused. "I have a couch." Something moved behind those careful eyes. "You don't know me." "No," she agreed. "But I know what a man looks like when he's deciding between pride and hypothermia, and I've seen that choice go wrong." She held his gaze. "I'm not rescuing you. I'm offering you a couch and 4 walls until morning. You leave at 7. We never see each other again." The security guard had retreated, watching from the door. Jaewon rose. He was taller than she'd calculated, taller and broader, and the movement was so controlled, so economical, that her internal warning system fired once before going quiet. Not because the danger wasn't there, because something about the way he moved said he wouldn't direct it at her. She walked, he followed. Neither of them said anything for 3.5 blocks. Inside her apartment, she pointed to the bathroom, handed him a clean towel from the closet shelf, and told him there was a first aid kit under the sink. He accepted both without comment. She heated water for instant oatmeal, the only thing in the cabinet that wouldn't wake Malik's appetite when Mrs. Gloria dropped him home at 7, and set a bowl on the counter. When he came out, he'd cleaned the gash above his hairline she hadn't been able to see in the dark. The shirt was still on. His jacket was folded over his arm. He sat on the couch without being told twice. She handed him the oatmeal. He looked at it, then at her, with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. "Thank you," he said. "Don't thank me. Sleep." She went to bed. She lay awake for 40 minutes, listening for any sound from the living room. There was nothing. No movement, no searching. No footsteps toward the bedroom door. At 3 a.m., she heard him exhale. Long, slow, the kind of breath a person lets out when they've been holding their body tight for too long and have finally cautiously decided they might be safe. She didn't know why that sound loosened something in her chest. She told herself it was exhaustion. In the morning, Malik found him first. Nayara came out of the bedroom to the sight of her 6-year-old standing in front of the couch in his dinosaur pajamas, examining the stranger with the seriousness of a professor. "You're big," Malik announced. Jaewon, already awake, sitting with his elbows on his knees, looked at the child with what appeared to be genuine uncertainty, the first unguarded expression she'd seen on him. "Yes. Do you know any dinosaurs?" A pause. "Some." "What's the fastest one?" "Compsognathus." Malik's eyes went wide. He dropped onto the couch beside Jaewon like they were old friends. "My teacher said Velociraptor. Your teacher is not wrong." But Compsognathus was lighter. Nayara stood in the doorway of her kitchen with her coffee mug, watching a man who had barely spoken 20 words to her engage her son in a debate about Cretaceous period locomotion, and felt the ground shift just slightly beneath her feet. She told him he could stay 2 more days, until the ribs were stable enough to travel. That was her first mistake. Or maybe, looking back at everything that came after, maybe it wasn't a mistake at all. She just didn't know it yet. The truth was that Jaewon Hale, the name he'd given her, and the only true thing in his wallet, had not ended up bleeding on South Michigan Avenue by accident. He'd been running for 11 days, not from the police, not from debt, from the people he'd spent his entire adult life building an empire for, who had decided, at a meeting he was not invited to attend, that he was more useful dead than alive. He knew exactly how dangerous it was to stay in one place. He stayed anyway. He told himself it was tactical, a temporary shelter, somewhere to stabilize while he assessed his next move. He didn't tell himself why. When Malik fell asleep against his arm at 8 a.m. with a dinosaur book across his lap, he didn't move for 40 minutes. Want to know what happens next? Keep watching. Days 3 through 10. 2 days became 4. 4 became a week. It wasn't a decision so much as a sequence of small practical facts. On day 3, Jaewon woke at 5 a.m. and made coffee before Nayara's alarm. On day 4, she came home to find the broken cabinet hinge she'd been ignoring for 6 months fixed, the dishes done, and Malik at the table doing homework with a patience she had never managed to summon after a 12-hour shift. On day 5, she stopped leaving her phone facing down when he was in the room. She didn't ask him why he was hiding. He didn't volunteer it. They existed in a careful equilibrium, her rules, his silence, Malik's complete disregard for both. "Jay, watch this." Malik had already shortened the name without asking. He launched himself off the couch cushion and landed in a crouch on the rug. "Raptor attack. Your form needs work." Jaewon didn't look up from the window he was watching with more attention than she was supposed to notice. "Raptors kept low. Your head was too high." Malik dropped lower on his next attempt. Nayara watched from the kitchen doorway, a dish towel in her hand, and understood that something was happening in her apartment that she had no framework for. On day 7, she asked him directly, "Are you in trouble?" He was standing at the kitchen counter pouring water. His back was to her. The white shirt he'd been wearing when she found him had been washed twice and dried on the radiator. The 4 buttons at his collar were undone. She'd noticed that from the first night, had noticed the dragon tattoo that curled up the left side of his neck, dark ink like brushstrokes, and had chosen not to think about what it meant. He didn't turn around. "Yes. The kind I should know about? The kind it's safer for you not to know about?" "That's not an answer." "No." He set down the glass. It's not. She crossed her arms. If whatever's looking for you finds my address, I need to know I have a kid. He turned then. The kitchen was small, 4 steps between them. His eyes, when they met hers, were doing the calculation she'd seen from the first night, the one that weighed cost against exposure against something she couldn't name. I was the head of a financial organization, he said, the kind that governments don't officially acknowledge. The people I worked with decided I was a liability. I've been moving since I found out. A pause. I have a contact in Seattle. Once I can travel without being tracked, I'll go. She absorbed that. How long? Another week, maybe less. And until then? Until then, he said, I'm a man with a cracked rib staying on your couch, and that's all. She held his gaze. Don't lie to me again by omission. Something in his expression, not softening exactly, more like a door opening a centimeter. All right. That night she came home to find he'd reorganized her medical supplies with a precision that bordered on professional, medications sorted by category, expiry dates checked, the kit she kept under the bathroom sink restocked with bandages she hadn't realized she was out of. She stood in the bathroom doorway and stared at it for a long moment. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know. Thank you. Don't thank me. She almost smiled. Almost. You sound like me. For the first time, the corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, but close enough that she noticed, and close enough that she had to remind herself what the word gratitude meant, and what the word other meant, and why there was a difference. On day 8, he watched her rebraid her hair at the kitchen table, her hands working through 2-strand twists with the efficiency of muscle memory, Malik asleep, the apartment quiet. She looked up and found him watching with an expression she had no category for, not intrusive, not performative. Something closer to the way you look at something you didn't know was beautiful until it was right in front of you. You can ask, she said. Ask what? Whatever you're thinking. People always have questions. He was quiet for a moment. How long does it take? Depends on length. These take about 2 hours. Does it hurt? No. Some styles do. These don't. She returned to her work. Your turn. My turn? The tattoo, what does it mean? A pause long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer. My mother chose it. She said a dragon protects what matters. She had it commissioned the year I took over the organization. His voice dropped a register. I've never been sure if it was a blessing or a warning. Nayara's hands stilled in her hair. Maybe both, she said quietly. He looked at her across the table. The kitchen light was amber, and the city outside the window was dark, and somewhere in the distance a train moved along the elevated tracks, its sound low and steady as a heartbeat. Maybe both, he agreed. She went back to her hair. He went back to watching the street. But something between them had shifted, quiet as a door easing open in the dark, and neither of them acknowledged it, because acknowledging it would mean deciding what to do about it. They weren't ready for that, not yet. But fate, as it turned out, was done waiting. The truth was more complicated than anyone knew. Let's continue. Day 12. The men appeared on the block 3 days before the bullet did. J1 saw them first. 2 sedans with Illinois plates that hadn't moved in 18 hours, parked at opposite ends of Naira's street. He said nothing. He repositioned his sleeping spot from the couch to the chair beside the door. He stopped using the front windows. Nayara noticed the chair. She didn't ask. Not yet. On the afternoon of day 12, she came home from a double shift to find Malik doing homework at the table, a bowl of cut fruit beside him, mango and watermelon, Malik's favorites, which J1 had apparently learned by silent observation, and J1 at the window with his back to the room and a stillness that had moved from careful to taut. There are 2 cars, she said, dropping her bag. Not a question. He turned. You noticed? I've lived on this street for 6 years. She crossed to Malik, kissed the top of his head, lowered her voice. How long? 3 days. She kept her face neutral. In 12 years of nursing, she'd learned to perform calm as a biological function. Are they here for you? Yes. What do they want? The same thing they've wanted since January. His jaw was set, but his voice remained level. To make sure I can't testify to what I know. She moved to the kitchen, filled a glass of water, drank half of it, and turned back. "So you brought this to my door." The words landed the way she intended, without theatre, without accusation. Just the fact of it sitting between them. He held her gaze. "Yes. I'm sorry." "Don't be sorry. Tell me what to do." Something moved across his face, too fast to read, but she felt it. "I'm going to leave tonight, draw them away from the building. Once I'm gone—" "They don't know who I am." A pause, long enough to tell her the answer before he said it. "They do now. My disappearance was not—" He stopped, chose his words. "They traced every location I'd been in the last 2 weeks. This building will be in their data." The water glass was cold in her hand. She set it down carefully. "Malik," she called, keeping her voice light, "can you go grab your backpack from the bedroom, baby? We might go see Grandma Gloria tonight." "Okay." The chair scraped back. The second Malik disappeared down the hall, the apartment locked into a different kind of quiet. "I will handle this," Jaewon said. "You don't need to— My son is in that bedroom." Her voice dropped, every syllable precise. "So I need you to stop telling me what I don't need and start telling me what we're actually dealing with." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he sat at the kitchen table, white shirt, 4 buttons loose, the dragon watching her from the side of his neck, and told her everything. The organization. The Hale Group, a financial network operating through import and consulting fronts in 5 cities, with connections to 3 Korean syndicates in the Pacific Rim. His role? He had run operations for 11 years. What he'd discovered, that his second-in-command, a man named Park Dae-jung, had been diverting funds to a rival faction, and had covered it by constructing evidence that pointed to Jaewon. The meeting that was supposed to address the discrepancy had been a setup. He'd walked out with 2 minutes warning and a blade across his ribs, and he'd been running since. He had evidence. Encrypted files on a server in Seattle, accessible only through credentials he carried in a device sewn into the lining of his jacket. And Park's people had been looking for that device, and for him, for 11 days. Nayara listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 3 seconds. "The files in Seattle, can you transmit them remotely?" He blinked, just slightly. "If I had a secure connection, yes. My neighbor 2 floors up is an IT security analyst. He owes me a favor." She stood. "You said they're outside right now. What happens if you leave through the back?" "They have eyes on the alley. Then we don't use the alley." She was already thinking through it, the way she moved through triage, assess, prioritize, act. "If you can transmit those files to the right people, you neutralize Park's leverage, correct? They lose their reason to—" The window above Malik's bedroom exploded inward. The sound registered before she could think. She moved, across the apartment in 3 steps, body curving toward the blast, not away, because her child was in that direction. She hit the hallway, scooped Malik mid-scramble, pulled him back and down and under the kitchen table in one motion, her arms a cage around him, back curved over his head, glass on her spine. Not cutting. Not yet. "Mama, I got you. Don't move." Silence. Then 3 sharp knocks at the door. She knew the rhythm. She didn't know how she knew it. The door opened. Jaewon moved through the apartment, swift, systematic, checking every angle before his gaze found her beneath the table. He crossed to her in 4 steps and crouched, close enough that she could see the precise calculation in his face, assessing her for injury, checking Malik, running a threat sequence in the same span of seconds. "Are you hurt?" "No." "Malik?" "I'm scared," Malik said, face pressed into her chest. "I know." Jaewon's voice shifted, still controlled but quieter. "You're brave, you stayed still, that was right." He straightened, extended a hand to her. She took it. He pulled her up with one motion, steadied her when she found her footing, and didn't let go of her hand quite immediately. She noticed. "We need to leave," he said. "I know." She looked down at Malik, still wrapped around her waist, then up at Jaewon. "My neighbor 2 floors up, Kwame. We go there first, you transmit those files, and then I end this," he said. "Tonight." She held his gaze. The kitchen light was still on. Glass on the floor, her heartbeat steady by force of will. "Then let's go," she said. But fate had other plans. Keep watching to find out what happened next. Kwame Asante opened his door at 11:47 p.m. in a Howard University sweatshirt, took one look at the three of them, glass in Nayara's braids, Malik half asleep on her hip, a Korean man with a knife-cut jaw and a neck tattoo producing a thumb drive from his jacket lining, and said, "Come in, coffee or tea?" "Tea," Nayara said, and a secure connection. Already pulling it up. She had met Kwame on her third week in the building, when he'd helped her carry a stroller up 4 flights during an elevator outage. In the years since, he'd fixed her laptop twice, picked up Malik from school during 2 separate emergencies, and never once asked for anything in return. She had never had cause to explain that his calmness under pressure was one of the most reassuring qualities a human being could possess. Tonight, she was grateful for it down to her bones. Jae-won set the drive on Kwame's desk and explained in clipped, precise sentences what it contained and where it needed to go. Kwame listened, asked 3 technical questions that Jae-won answered with equal precision, and began working. Nayara settled Malik on Kwame's couch beneath a blanket and sat beside him until his breathing slowed into sleep. Then she straightened and crossed to where Jae-won stood by the window watching the street below. "Park's people," she said quietly. "The men outside. What happens when those files land? He loses protection." Jae-won didn't take his eyes off the street. The organizations shielding him have been under federal observation for 2 years. The moment that documentation hits the right inboxes, they'll cut him loose. A beat. He knows that. Which is why they needed me before I could transmit. And now they've lost that window. Yes. So they come harder. He turned. His expression was controlled, but something beneath it, a particular kind of tension in the line of his shoulders, told her he'd been expecting that. Possibly. "Stop." She kept her voice low, steady. "Stop protecting me from the information. I told you that." His jaw tightened. "I don't want to be the reason you didn't pull the trigger on my window." She met his gaze directly. "You also didn't manufacture the cold front that put you on my block. I made choices. Every day you've been here, I made choices." She held his gaze. "Don't take those from me now by deciding I can't handle the consequences." The room was quiet, except for the sound of Kwame typing. Jae-won looked at her for a long moment. Long enough that she felt it settle somewhere behind her sternum, that particular weight of being truly seen by someone who doesn't look at things carelessly. "Park will move tonight," he said. "He knows the window is closing. He'll send people to this building. Then we make sure they find nothing." He was still looking at her. "Nayara." "What? Why did you stop?" The question came quietly. "That night. You knew better. You said so." She didn't pretend not to understand. "Because you were bleeding and alone and nobody else stopped." "That's not enough reason to take in a stranger. It was enough for me." She paused. "I've worked trauma nursing for 8 years. I know what someone looks like when the danger around them isn't them. I was scared of the wrong thing." A beat. "I'm not scared of you." Something in his face cracked open, just slightly, just for a second, like watching a structure that has been braced against pressure for so long that the release of it looks almost like pain. "You should be," he said. "Probably." She crossed her arms. "I'm not." From the desk, Kwame's voice broke through. "Files are away. 3 receiving parties. 1 federal task force and 2 international finance regulators." He pulled off his headset. "Whoever this Park person is, his next 72 hours are about to become extremely uncomfortable." Jae-won exhaled, measured, deliberate. "Thank you." "Thank her," Kwame said, nodding at Nayara. "She's the one who kept you breathing long enough to get here." An hour later, Jae-won took a call in the hallway that lasted 4 minutes. When he came back, something had shifted in how he held himself. The strung wire tension released, replaced by something more deliberate, more present. "Park's people have been recalled," he said. "A contact confirmed. The documentation triggered a freeze order. They're cutting connections. He's exposed." "It's over?" she asked. "The immediate threat is over." He paused. "There are longer processes, things that will take months to resolve. But the danger to you and Malik—" He stopped. "That's done." Malik stirred on the couch, murmured her name. She went to him, stroked his back, felt him settle. When she looked up, Jae-won was watching them with an expression she recognized. Not from him, but from patients she'd sat with in the hours after something had nearly been taken from them, the look of someone recalibrating what matters. "You can go," she said quietly. "Seattle, your contact. You don't have to stay." He was quiet for a moment. "I know." "But—" She raised an eyebrow. The corner of his mouth moved, that almost smile she'd catalogued from day 3. "But I find I'm not particularly interested in leaving." She looked at him, the low lamp glass still in her braids. Malik asleep 3 feet away. The wreckage of 12 days spread between them like a map she hadn't expected to be on. "That's a bad idea," she said. "Yes," he agreed. "I have a 6-year-old who will ask you about dinosaurs every morning." "I know." "And I work nights. I'm tired frequently and I'm not always kind about it. I've noticed." He said it without irony. "I don't mind." She held his gaze. J1. Nayara. Don't make promises you'll take back when things get real. He crossed the room in 3 steps, stopped close enough that she had to tilt her chin up, and looked at her the way he looked at the street, with total attention, nothing held back. "I don't make promises," he said quietly. "I make decisions." She searched his face, found nothing there but the truth. "Then decide carefully," she said. "I already have." His answer would change everything. Stay tuned. 2 months later. The thing about rebuilding a life was that it happened in increments too small to celebrate individually, but that added up in aggregate to something almost unrecognizable. Nayara's apartment had a new window. J1 had arranged the repair with the same systematic attention he applied to everything. Contractor vetted, installation silent, no footprint. The kitchen counter now had a small cactus on it that Malik had named Jerome, and tended with the gravity of a horticultural professional. The couch still had a throw pillow on the left armrest that wasn't technically Nayara's. She'd stopped mentioning that. Park Dae-jung had been formally indicted 6 weeks after the files landed. The international finance freeze had cascaded into a federal wire fraud investigation, and 3 of the organizations connected to the Hale Group's operations were currently cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for reduced exposure. J1's name had been officially cleared within the internal structure. The documentation had been thorough enough that there was no ambiguity about who had been set up and who had done the setting. He had spent the first 2 weeks navigating those processes, phone calls at odd hours, brief trips, always with someone who drove a nondescript car and knew how to scan a room. He told her everything he could tell her, in the vocabulary of someone who had learned that full disclosure mattered more than protecting her from complexity. She appreciated that more than she told him. On a Tuesday evening in late April, he came home. She'd stopped catching herself on that word, with takeout from the Korean restaurant on Lawrence Avenue and a question he'd been building toward for 2 weeks. "I want to tell you something," he said, setting containers on the table while Malik arranged chopsticks with ceremonial focus. "Okay. The organization." He paused. "I'm stepping back. Formally. The legitimate assets, real estate holdings, 2 import businesses, those are being transferred into a legal trust under a board. I'll consult, nothing operational." He looked at her. "I should have done it years ago. I didn't have a reason that outweighed the inertia." Nayara looked at him across the kitchen. "And now?" "Now I have 2. His gaze moved briefly to Malik, then back to her. She felt the weight of that settle in her chest, warm and serious at once. "J1. She kept her voice level. "I need to say something." "All right." "I didn't fall for you because you stepped in front of danger." She held his gaze. "And I'm not staying because I owe you anything. Those are not the reasons. I know that. Do you?" He set down the container in his hand and looked at her the way he had in Kwame's apartment, with the entirety of his attention, nothing performing, nothing held back. "You stopped on a street when no one else did," he said. "You gave a stranger 4 walls and a couch and didn't ask for anything in return. You faced men with guns and your first instinct was to cover your son, and your second was to solve the problem." He paused. "You told me not to protect you from information, and meant it. You have never once asked me to be something I'm not. A beat." "I know exactly why I'm here," he said, "and I know exactly why I want to stay." Malik looked between them with the evaluative seriousness of someone who had been monitoring this situation for 2 months and had reached his conclusions. "Are you going to be my dad?" he asked. The kitchen went quiet. Nayara's pulse jumped once. She looked at Jaewon, ready to run interference, and found him looking at her son with an expression that stopped the breath in her throat. Entirely unguarded, something cracked completely open. "That's your mother's call," he said, careful and honest. "And yours." Malik turned to Nayara. "Mama." She looked at her son, then at the man across her kitchen table, white shirt, collar open, dragon tattoo visible at his neck. Takeout containers between them, the cactus named Jerome in the window behind him, all the ordinary domesticity of the 12 days and the 2 months assembled into something she hadn't planned and couldn't have manufactured. "We can talk about it," she said, "all 3 of us." Malik nodded with deep satisfaction and reached for his chopsticks. Later, much later, after Malik was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Jaewon sat beside her on the couch, and she leaned her head against his shoulder, and they watched the city through the window she'd had fixed. "I used to think safe was something you built alone," she said. "So did I." His hand moved to the back of her neck, careful and warm. "I was wrong about a lot of things." She tilted her head up. He met her halfway, the way he did everything measured and deliberate and entirely present, and the kiss was nothing like danger and everything like choice. Her choice. His choice. Made clearly, with open eyes, in a kitchen in the south side of Chicago, 4 blocks from where it had all started on the coldest night of the year. The dragon on his neck caught the lamplight. She had decided weeks ago that it was a blessing. 6 months after the bullet shattered the window above Malik's head, Nayara Bennett stood in a Department of Education office on West Monroe Street, signing paperwork for a nursing education grant she'd applied for 4 years earlier and been denied twice. The denial had always come down to documentation, financial records, proof of stable circumstances. Her circumstances were at present stable. Jaewon waited in the hallway with Malik, who was explaining his recent opinions on Stegosaurus' defensive strategy to a man who had once commanded a multi-city criminal syndicate and was currently nodding with apparent sincerity. She signed her name at the bottom of the form and slid it across the desk. Outside, Jaewon looked up when she appeared. No white shirt today. A soft navy pullover, collar open, the dragon just visible at his neck. He read her face before she said anything, the way he read most things, and the corner of his mouth moved. Malik launched himself at her. "Did you get it?" "I got it." Jaewon's hand found the small of her back. Quiet. Steady. His. "What do we do to celebrate?" Malik demanded. She looked at Jaewon. "Korean barbecue," he said. "Korean barbecue," she agreed. They walked out into the April sun, the 3 of them together, choosing each other, one ordinary day at a time.